This is overwhelmingly more satire than science fiction.
Precisely.
The sci-fi in Back to the Future is really more of a primer for the sequels they didn't know they were going to make. Back to the Future 2 has the same basic premise as the original, but this time it actually is science fiction. In fact, what's interesting and rare about the Back to the Future trilogy is all three movies execute the same premise in completely different genres. Back to the Future, as you know, is a satire. Back to the Future 2 is science fiction. And Back to the Future 3 is a Western. Not a big surprise there. The only other trilogy I can think of that does this is Alien. The subject of this video isn't going to be so much about what makes Back to the Future science fiction. There really isn't much dispute surrounding that. But it's worth digging into the sci-fi a bit, which has some deeper and sometimes darker implications you might not have considered, since these movies are generally presented in a light, comedic framework.
Mom, is that you?
The overarching science fiction trait featured in Back to the Future 2 is a common one, where technology is invented and used for the benefit of society, but unintentionally becomes an agent of terror. Think 2001, Terminator, Ex Machina,
You're wrong.
WALL-E.
Must follow my directive.
Back to the Future 2 is a great exemplification of this.
I remember bars being on these windows.
Despite Doc's selfish but good intentions,
I didn't invent the time machine to win at gambling. I invented the time machine to travel through time.
it quickly becomes apparent how precarious his invention of time travel can be, where even the slightest amount of pollution in a timeline
This book tells the future.
can have destructive consequences. This explains why Back to the Future 2 is the darkest of the trilogy.
No. This can't be happening.
The movie kicks off with the closing scene of Back to the Future, which looks entirely the same down to the shot, except for one element. Jennifer.
How about a ride, mister?
To the audience, Jennifer is a different girl, but to the characters in the movie, she's the same Jennifer she's always been. This is a butterfly effect consequence of Marty fucking around with the past. There was a little acknowledgement of this effect in the first movie, but it was only centered around the direct consequences of Marty's parents never meeting as they originally had.
Erased from existence.
Not something random or unintended like what happens to Jennifer, or what eventually happens to Hill Valley.
No. Oh, please, God, no.
Like I said, some dark shit goes down in this movie. This is a faithful example of the difference between a premise and a genre. Back to the Future has time travel in it. Back to the Future 2 is about time travel. Mr. Fusion is another example. Doc's introduction of Mr. Fusion at the end of Back to the Future was little more than just a cute detail to underline him returning from the future. In this movie, its presence is much more meaningful and critical to the future we're about to encounter. When we get to 2015, there's a lot of business surrounding money.
Come $100, will you, and help save the clock tower?
That'll be $174.50.
Here. 39, 9.99, 90.
Go in and order a Pepsi. Here's a 50.
And wait for
Do not mistake these for throwaway jokes about inflation. That's over 5,000% cumulative inflation, which is actually a thing called hyperinflation. It's only occurred a few times in recent history and under the most extreme circumstances. In real life, inflation between 1985 and 2015 is only around 120%. Something economically catastrophic must have happened between 1985 and 2015 to cause this massive hyperinflation. So, what happened? Well, one way hyperinflation can happen is when technology advances suddenly to the benefit of a society, resulting in increased disposable income, known to econ dweebs as positive technology shock. So, what technological advancement could have been so radical it would have caused the denizens of the Back to the Future universe to pay $50 for a Pepsi? Yes, Mr. Fusion. And remember, Doc uses Mr. Fusion to power the time circuits,
Mr. Fusion powers the time circuits and the flux capacitor.
which means it's able to provide at least 1.21 gigawatts of power on demand. Unlimited energy, generated by garbage, in a device small enough to fit under the hood of a car.
I need fuel.
That invention would ruin even the most robust economy, which it did in the case of Back to the Future 2. When Mr. Fusion hit the market, non-discretionary energy money was instantly converted to just plain old discretionary money, which meant over $1 trillion per year was put back into the pocket of every United States denizen. That's like printing over $1 trillion every year. The public had more money to spend on stuff, so the stuff got more expensive. And don't start on the Texaco station. There wouldn't be gasoline in a world of free, abundant energy generated by trash. More likely, Texaco would have pivoted into distributing some form of concentrated refuse, easily convertible to energy by a Mr. Fusion device. I don't know, definitely not gas. So, Mr. Fusion is silently the hardest sci-fi concept in the whole movie. And it also makes not just for science fiction, but dystopian science fiction. Economic considerations aside, there are other little agents of terror peppered throughout the movie indicating a dystopia. Like the fact there's an atrocity channel.
I'll crack the atrocity channel.
Which I guess is Bravo in this future. And apparently your superiors at work can just instantiate a call without any warning or consent. That's a little fascist, don't you think? Speaking of horribly fascist, they've apparently abolished the constitutional right to legal representation.
The justice system works swiftly in the future now that they've abolished all lawyers.
Sounds like an awesome place to live. Aside from time travel hijinks, is there a practical, over-the-counter use for this thing other than date raping somebody? This, along with what seems to be a black market for bionic implants,
Be careful around that Griff character. He's got a few short circuits in his bionic implants.
implies a widespread amorality in the development of technology.
Got the sleep inducer. I was afraid of this. Hey, butthead!
Just like in the last one, Biff and Marty are basically the same character. Of course, they're both still shamelessly sex-motivated. They both have the same idea to use the sports almanac for financial gain. They both seem to suffer from a deep inferiority complex, for which they both compensate with violence.
Nobody calls me chicken needles. Nobody!
You're not even half the man he was.
I wonder what would have happened had Marty used the almanac instead of Biff.
I can't lose.
He demonstrates he's capable of doing unscrupulous things with very little encouragement. And he really only seems deterred by the prospect of enduring unpleasant consequences, not any kind of moral conflict.
And if it doesn't work, Needles, I could get fired. It's illegal. I mean, what if the JITS is monitoring, huh?
Perhaps the differences between an autocratic society that is Biff-centric might not be so different from one that's Marty-centric. It wouldn't be a Back to the Future movie without overt demonstrations of sex stuff, like the sex-motivated McFly family,
Oh, yeah, great, Mom. We're like a couple of teenagers, you know? Hey, Mom, nice pants.
sexual assault,
You got no scrote?
You look better wearing nothing at all. Through your thick skull, Lorraine. You're my girl.
Hey, Mom, nice pants.
and just explicit sexual content in general.
You were the one who wanted me to get these things.
Ooh la la. Ooh la la. Hey, Mom, nice pants.
In this scene, Doc indicates Marty Jr. is arriving
Precisely on schedule. I already went further ahead into time to see what else happens. I backtracked everything to this one event.
This implies he's observed every relevant event that's led up to and is a consequence of this robbery Griff is planning. So, where are all the other Docs? Presumably, it would have taken several trips through time to create a schedule of events with this level of detail. Doc would need to exercise the same caution he stresses to Marty in 2 time periods.
Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anything. Don't do anything. Don't interact with anyone. And try not to look at anything. So you must be very careful not to run into your other self.
In order to not interfere with the several other Docs contemporaneously interacting with the Clock Tower Square. But he doesn't, because there don't seem to be any. Is that because he's inadvertently created alternate 2015s where the other Docs don't exist? He's clearly violating his own rules for minimizing interaction with foreign timelines. And they're really good rules. Wouldn't the lack of other Docs be some paradoxical consequence of not adhering to his own rules? By the way, how the fuck does Doc pay for all this stuff? He mentions in the first movie how,
It's taken me almost 30 years of my entire family fortune to realize.
so it's implied he's short on cash. He lives in a fairly dumpy place after his house burned down. Also, one of the more overlooked details from the first movie, he works as a 24-hour mobile scientist. That job doesn't sound like something a rich dude does.
Marty! You've got to come back with me.
Where?
Back to the future.